Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates, First Data Resources, and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome once again to Consider This. Many of us are third or fourth or fifth generation Americans, and we've heard stories told by maybe our great-grandparents passed down about the masses of immigrants that came to this country from Czechoslovakia and Ireland and Germany, Croatia, all over, with their own language and their own cultures, and how they had to assimilate and find the American dream. We find this whole thing repeating right now in Nebraska, in Omaha, Nebraska, in our Hispanic and Latino population. Special challenges, and maybe we're not as understanding as we should be because we don't remember what it was like. My guests today are Jose Garcia. He's a community activist, a dispatcher for Union Pacific Railroad. I only mention that because he is really entrenched in the city and has been for a long time. Recently made a run for the seat, Sabian Zettel's seat on the city council. Didn't make the cut, but I know we'll see you back.
Oh, I'm out of breath, but I'm catching it now.
that run. Also with us, and we're proud to say, someone who's close to UNO, Teresa Barrow McKegney, is with the School of Social Work here. She is a professor.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
And this whole subject of our new immigrant population. That's what I like to think of it. It's just history repeating itself, except it's instead of 10 or 15 or 20 different insurgencies from other countries, it's one that we think of. Most recently, we kept hearing race relations. We have a race relations problem in Omaha. We need to do a survey. We need to do this. We need to take a look at it. Not once did I hear Hispanic Latino, although it's not a race, it's more of an ethnic group. You know, we keep thinking black, white problems. I don't want to start with problems, but are you surprised that it wasn't mentioned? Because we have some problems in particularly South Omaha.
You know, it's like Yogi Berra used to say, it's deja vu all over again. The civil rights, the whole civil rights issue of the 60s and 70s is still very fresh in people's mind. It was Martin Luther King, it was burning down cities. Afterwards, it was Model City money, it was the federal government, the city governments understanding that they had a problem. The problem in the Midwest, in Kansas City, in Omaha, in Wichita, even in Chicago was a problem with relationships with the black population. In the Midwest, there was not until recently a large Hispanic, Mexican, Latino population. So the infrastructure was designed to meet the needs of black people, of black
with their
populations.
particular history in this country.
Right, based upon the history
and
of
their
civil
concerns
rights.
and
Right.
angst.
Yes.
But am I missing something, or it hasn't been mentioned or concern raised about?
No, I don't think you're missing anything, Carol. Actually, I think that it's pretty profound when you have a population such as ours that exists in the United States at 22 to 24 million people, and you don't have the recognition that we as a group deserve to be getting some attention from. And so I don't think that it's something that just was left out, not on purpose. I think purposefully it's left out.
I think in the meetings it was probably talked about.
Yes.
But I mean, in terms of the public presence or the concerns, it's always been, you know, the blacks saying this isn't right, or this survey isn't good enough, or this is a joke, or whatever. No one ever went, and I'm a member of the media. No one ever went to the Hispanic population and said, you know, now do you think we need a survey, or do you think we have problems?
Well, you know, the Chicanos, and I'm a veteran of the Chicano movement. We've been a very self-determined people. It's not that we don't, when we have a need, we don't go out and look for help. We try to help ourselves. And that's been the tradition that has been a hallmark of our growth as an element of society all these generations. It wasn't until the early 70s that the Chicano movement exploded into the American scene. In Kansas City, I know that we were very, very active and brought about quite a lot of changes. But they weren't governmental changes as much as they were changes in the community.
Well, we can go back and look at California and the labor movement in the Chicano then was the the migrant workers and whatever. But the interesting difference here is that all my ancestors, Irish, Czech, German, they came here to make a better life.
Right.
And most of the Latinos here, there are jobs here. They can either send money back or just make a new home here or both. Why is it that there's a little difference in how the corpus, the body of the population here, looks at the Latinos as opposed to way maybe, and I wasn't there 100 years ago, looked at this, all these other groups, this melting pot that was coming.
Sure. I think that, from the way I look at things is from a very macro perspective. I like to look at things from a structural perspective and from an institutional perspective.
Well, that's what you do.
I think
you deal
that,
with institutions in your work.
And so I think that when we examine what's happening with a Latino immigrant, we're looking at a country that feels like Latinos shouldn't be here to begin with, who are immigrating into this country because of these myths that are pervasive in terms of people taking other people's jobs away, in terms of us not assimilating. And so I think that it's very good that you remember what it was like perhaps when previous generations immigrated to this country. In terms of the policy of the day, it was assimilationist policy. And everybody that immigrated to this country usually was from some European nation that had some genetic qualities that looked pretty similar to one another. I think another thing that doesn't help us in terms of our immigration is we are not blonde and blue-eyed and fair-skinned. We look the way we look.
Or have those amongst your population.
Exactly. We are who we are. And I think that people also have this incredible fear about us as a group, that somehow we're just not going to fit in. And we do fit in. We work the jobs that no one else wants to work at.
I was going to give you a timeout when you said the perception that they're taking other people's jobs. It is clear with, the exceptions would be so minimal they wouldn't even measure on the Richter scale, that the jobs that our new wave of immigrants is taking in this country are those that pay lower than they did adjusted for inflation.
Right.
When I was a kid and regular German and Irish people were doing those jobs. And the other thing is we can't get people to work them, and we need them to fuel our economy.
Right.
The Hispanic population is fueling our economy
That's absolutely
in
right.
Georgia,
Yes, that's
in
true.
Texas,
Right,
in
North
South
Carolina.
Carolina, on the East Coast.
Just take a look at 24th Street, Carol. I've been with the Chicano Awareness Center since 1982. That's when I came back to work in the community. And, buildings were closing down, businesses were shutting down.
The old
And
South
then-
Omaha
exactly.
with the Phillips department store.
Exactly. And then what happened, through being, and Jose, you know this too, in the community for almost 20 years, we see this resurgence of basically ethnic pride and also business pride. You take a look at 24th Street and all these businesses that are coming up are Latino-based businesses, families from different countries that are coming into this country and saying, we're entrepreneurs and we're business people and we're going to make it here.
An interesting thing that shows that so beautifully, and you might see it differently because your eyes are looking from a different perspective, but recently before the Omaha City Council there was a little neighborhood debacle about a dancing club, a bar, that was playing salsa music and having dancing late at night, and the neighbors were upset. And so the City Council did kind of have a problem with the hours that they were keeping, and I don't remember what the disposition was. They recommended that their liquor license be removed. But
Yeah.
and I'm sure that there might be some perspective that was this racist, but I thought, now, is this the American dream or what?
Right.
In a sense, in a bizarre sense, they came, they started a business, they have the same squabbles that many bar owners in Omaha have had over the years. Now maybe there's more to it than I'm just saying, but it just struck me as, well, they're fitting in.
And they are. Guacamaya is the name of the restaurant. It used to be the old shortstop.
But this is down on 42nd Street.
Right, right.
And pass it many times. But do you know what I'm saying? Now there might be more to it, but I thought, these are the squabbles of everyday living and running a business. Liquor licenses are always unique in many ways. But
Yeah, the question of assimilation, and I remember when I was growing up in the west side of Kansas City, I worshipped Hopalong Cassidy. You know, even Davy Crockett. I was running around with my raccoon hat on.
Well, the local publisher, Ben Salazar, tells how I used to watch Lawrence Welk.
Yeah.
Right.
And love the music.
You know, Ed Sullivan was a Sunday night staple, the Bonanza. I'm an American as apple pie. But there was another element of my life that wasn't just the media, television. It was the tortillas. It was the Spanish Mass. It was the piñatas. It was a culture that we brought with us. You see, when we came to America, we didn't leave everything behind like the Europeans
and neither did the early generations of the people that I came from.
You know.
But I'm so farther removed.
Well, you are. When your people came, they left their names behind. You know, they left their style of life behind because it didn't fit in. The feudal life does not fit in the United States of America. All that was left behind. Yes, we also had a feudal life in Mexico or Central America. But when we came to America, it was a dream. It was prosperity to us. We stayed on our continent. We're still home.
That's right.
We're in the Americas.
Just realize that Mexicanos, people from all of the continents, mestizo continents of Central America, South America, are part of the world's longest sustained human immigration. You know?
Right, from Asia over
Well,
immigrated.
actually, Asia, heck, we've been populated, my contention is 30, 40,000 years ago, Polynesians, by Egyptians, by Norwegians.
So you were the first immigrants.
We populated the continent. We're hemispheric, you know, and why should we assimilate?
Yeah.
You know, although we're American, I'm an American. You know, Mr. Anderson questioned my Americanism in the World Herald last week.
This would be the Herald Anderson.
Yes, the Herald Anderson. And I have been a subscriber of the World Herald since day one. And this is the first time that I picked up the phone and harangued. Hey, how dare you question my Americanism? Did you question my Americanism when I signed up to go fight in Vietnam?
That's right.
Did you question the Americanism of my fellow soldiers that got their heads blown open while they were defending this country?
That's right.
Huh? So, you know, I think he has us confused with people that just got here and are wondering, why are they here? They're sad because they're gone. We're 5 generations deep. My people came here in 1921.
Well, let's talk about those that have come more recently and the growth in a neighborhood. And there is always, when people are different than you, and it's been many generations generally, since most of us have dealt with a population of people who had so many of them that they could continue to speak their own language most of the time. You know, they had enough people to talk to. So there wasn't that kind of need. There are so many people out here. Why don't they work to learn English?
Right. And they do. They do, Carol. It's like, how long would it take you to learn, if you're not a Spanish speaker now, if we put you in Mexico?
Terrible long time. I'm bad at languages now.
I'm going to say to you, why
when I
don't
was
you
young,
learn how to speak Spanish, Carol? You know, get with it. Come on. Are you intellectually inferior? I mean, you know, we could say a whole bunch of things because you don't learn Spanish in a week. And so people are here. They're working 17-hour shifts. They're going to Metro. They're going over to NAF, the Nebraska Association of Farm Workers, to learn how to speak English. They're doing everything they possibly can to learn how to speak English because they understand that in this country, where English is the dominant language, they can't make it without some English. And so I think that that's also a myth that's out there that's perpetuated. And another thing I wanted to bring up too was last week I was able to participate in this Latino conference that was sponsored by several community agencies and held at Creighton University. But what I did was I spoke to a group of young Latina women, and in there what I did was I showed them what was in my newspaper, the Nopperell, the day before in terms of this anti-immigrant group that's coming out and talking about people who shouldn't be here because they can't assimilate, they don't know our language, they're taking our jobs, they don't know our American values. They're writing this down. And what they're doing is they're using the visual of children of color to kind of wipe out, you know, the whole issue of pluralism in our country, of multicultural diversity.
There actually was in Iowa, there were ads placed, I don't think they ran for very long, by a group out of Washington.
Yes.
That I think it was Storm Lake or Clear Lake, Iowa was one of the closest ones where they said, you know, this is how our town used to be. It isn't anymore. And basically blaming the immigrants. Now, we talked on the morning radio show with someone from that organization, And I wish we could have talked more. He was trying to spin it that it wasn't the immigration so much as the fact that the jobs here are low paying and therefore the people here don't want them, and that there are some illegal immigrants, which is a whole problem unto itself. But the fact that an ad ran like that and sort of blamed a group of people,
Yes.
namely Hispanic, for a degradation of a town that isn't that degraded,
That's
according
right.
to my friends there, I was.
And then people ask you, people say to you, you know, just get over it. I mean, I don't know how many times you've been asked this. Oh, Jose, you're too sensitive. Don't worry about that issue anymore. We had the civil rights movement. Everybody's treated fair and equal. It's not. It's not equal yet. You know, and I can't say that enough, and especially when you have this propaganda that's being pushed out onto our community that says to them, you're not wanted here. And here Jose has been here for several generations, so have I.
Yes.
And so, you know, I don't understand the bigotry that exists, and yet it still falls on our shoulders to try and deal with and help people understand that they shouldn't be so bigoted.
Do you see any inroads being made in the institutions in Omaha, or are you still feel that they're, you know, rightfully concerned, either not concerned at all or concerned about the black-white issue and some of the other? I guess those were holdover.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't solved those. How are we going to work on these? Maybe,
Yeah.
but. Do you see any inroads being made or eyes opened?
Well, there's a great motivation for inroads. I see a lot of dedicated people working in institutions, from the Juan Diego Center to the New Latina Resource Center to the Chicano Awareness Center to Nebraska Arts Council to Nebraska Farm Workers. But the problem is that there seems to be no coordination. There seems to be no focus. Everyone is working under their own umbrella.
Well, that's happened in North
You know,
Omaha
it's
for
raining,
years.
It's raining everywhere, and if you leave your umbrella, you're going to get wet by going to the other umbrella. What we need is a tent of humanity. This isn't a Latino issue. This isn't a black
Right.
issue. This is an issue of quality of life for all people. We are in America. I'm an American first, not a Latino or Chicano. I bleed red. You know, my blood's red like anyone else. But you know, it just seems that when there's interviews, well, how does it feel to be a Latino? Ask me, how does it feel to be a father of two? You know, how does it feel to be a college graduate?
But on the other hand, there are facets of ourselves where it's perfectly natural to say, how does it feel being a father?
Yeah.
How does it feel being a husband? How does it feel being a mom? How does it feel being a professor at the University of Nebraska at Omaha? So, but I know what you're saying. It's like, gee, I don't have anything to talk to you about, so.
Yeah, and you know, and getting back to your question about where's the representation of the Latino community? You know, in the 70s, I came at the second renaissance of the raza. You know, we are the precursors of the Mutualista Society. That is a society that was born in 1921 in Omaha. They were big. They helped people. They did Cinco de Mayo. They did the 16. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We were just following in their footsteps. Now we have the Chicano Awareness Center, the Mexican American Commission, the Indian Chicano Health Clinic, and the others. What is happening now is that those organizations that grew up in the 70s are maxed out. They're so busy dealing with social issues.
The Chicano Awareness Center was maxed out
Well, some time
a
ago.
decade ago.
But what we need is we need a groundswell of people that will come up and say, hey, we have a problem among people. Yes, there's Latinos here and there's blacks here and there's whites here, but we need to coordinate our efforts to serve the greatest amount of people with dwindling resources, even though we live in the richest economy the United States has ever known. But we still have dwindling resources in areas that we need support in. Housing, as an example.
Housing is an example, and there is one thing that sort of cropped up a little bit here a few weeks ago. We were talking to a man from the Census 2000, extremely concerned about parts of Omaha. I think their number one concern is the Hispanic community because of some fears or distrust about filling out census forms or having someone help them fill out census forms. And yet they are probably the burgeoning group that needs
Right.
to be counted the most in terms of, you know, federal assistance and the kinds of things. You know, we like some of our money back, you know.
That's right.
But there is, I mean, there's even distrust, as I understand from some of the Catholic priests, that many Latinos will come to church, are very church-going, but they won't put their name down on the roster. And they're not illegal. You know, that there is this a myth I'm hearing, or is this just distrust?
It goes deep.
Yeah, it
goes-
does. I was
goes
going to say,
deep. You
But
know,
there
does.
is distrust?
Whenever somebody asks me for my name, I must have 20 aliases. All these telemarketers and all these people,
Yeah.
hey, go in and do this,
Yeah.
this sweepstakes or the like. It comes to us that are in the establishment. I'm wearing a suit, but don't call me a huppie. A Hispanic urban, I'm not that.
Professional.
But even us have a certain, why should I give you my name? So we have
But there is some truth to this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, sure there is.
There's a confidence issue right there. The police are having big time problem
bet.
getting information. They just now
Yeah.
broke the case.
Yeah.
That South
Well,
Omaha
really?
double
Yeah,
murder.
the incident with the 2 people in the car
Yes.
and the homicide. Yeah, they've got
Yes.
one arrested and they're waiting,
Yeah, they're waiting
to
for
find
someone
another one.
else.
But there has to be some frustration on the part of those people in town who are Hispanic or not, that are really trying to do their jobs, i.e. the police.
Yeah.
That there is distrust. I stopped watching Cops because, but one of the things because it was always putting minority groups
Right.
in. It
Yeah,
was always minority.
yeah.
But the one thing I did notice from it was, there's a language chasm, there's an understanding chasm. If you could do something first, if you could wipe a barrier away or something tomorrow, other than spread some money around or something, but just a psychological barrier, what would it be?
I would just say to people, what I say to my students in social work, and when you asked what institutions do you believe are changing, I think that in the School of Social Work we do a great job of preparing students for what they're going to encounter once they leave, these hallowed halls. They're going to have to deal with diversity. And so I think that, just saying to my students, treat others like you would like to be treated. But understand that within their diversity, they may have a different language, they may have a different set of worldviews. So understand that and accept that and try and be culturally competent when you deliver services. Don't ask your clients to come to your perspective because that's where you feel comfortable.
And you're handing out the service or the money or whatever.
Exactly. And also be very aware of a system that perhaps is wanting you to assimilate everybody into the system, because then they don't have to change. If we have something that's been working in terms of a discriminatory action or behavior for the past 100 years, why would we want to change that? And so I ask my students to really analyze the situation from an institutional perspective and gather together with like-minded others to say, we can't permit this anymore. We've got to stop it. And so I ask them, just treat others the way that you want to be treated, but understand that everybody comes from their own point of view.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's America.
Yes,
It's we're a kaleidoscope. We're a society that is unknown in the annals of mankind. Thank God I'm not in Croatia. Sometimes people will come up to me and say, "How do you feel today?" Say, "I'm glad NATO hasn't bombed my house." We got to put the perspective in the fact that we live in America. We live in a land that provides a fertile ground to become maximum, to reach a potential.
Right,
Well,
a door may not always be open, but it might at least be cracked.
yeah,
Right.
And so
Right.
we need to look at that.
Yeah.
We ran a little low on time, so excuse me, I'm not trying to be rude. Going back to the issue of the race relations survey, assuming that a survey, and I'll give it an assumption for a moment, that a bona fide organization that knows how to find a proper, find the right populations to ask or select the right people to ask, assuming that's true and that the right questions could be formulated, do you think that we need to gauge racial attitudes at this point in time for future reference? Or do you think all those books and reports that people pulled out and said, we've done enough?
Carol, it always comes down to the same issue, which is you can look at a survey and say, well, geez, this is your attitude or this is your attitude. They've done attitudinal surveys forever in our country. It's the behavior that needs to change. So what are you going to do to account for your behavior that may be discriminatory? How are you going to account for discriminatory behavior? It's not the attitudes. I mean, people say, well, no, of course, I'd never burn a cross in someone's yard, but perhaps they'll do something that's less subtle, and they're going to continue doing that and perpetuate it that way. And so it's a matter of saying, what are we going to do to end bigotry? And it starts with the children. It starts with the parents that are saying to their children, it's okay for you to treat others and mistreat others. So it starts at that very, very young level.
It's the same lesson of Columbine, but in a little different way. That those that are different, those that are a little out there, whatever out there in your mind.
Yeah.
In your mind. You know, these were all white kids, or mostly. There was
Yeah.
one black.
Yes,
I mean, it's still the same. It's still the same lesson. It works. It cuts
Yes, it
all the way
does.
across.
That's right.
Let me ask you this: there is an extreme amount of poverty
Yeah.
in the Hispanic community here,
Absolutely.
and it's not that those people aren't working.
That's right.
Most of them don't come from a welfare tradition that we blame for a number of ills, whether real or imagined. They came here and worked and are still working, but the poverty, their income level as a whole, as an aggregate, is extraordinarily low.
That's right.
You know, are they getting the social services and the part of the things that our government is meant to help, or our social agencies are meant to help? Are they locked into that? Or are they afraid to get into that system?
It's not a fear as much as it is a work ethic that
Right.
if you don't work for something, it's worthless. You know, if you don't work for the house that you live in to pay the rent, if you don't work for your rent, you're nobody. Your dignity, whatever is left of it, is
So
gone.
how do you help those that feel that way when there is?
We have to be more open as a social providers. We have to find a way of reaching out and going out like we did in the 60s, of sending people neighborhood to neighborhood, door to door, like the census, and finding out where they are, who they are, why they're there, and then as intelligent people with an intent to help go back and gather the resources necessary to impact the problem. And this comes back to your first question. Where are our leaders? Where are our people that have the ability and talent to go out, reach out to the community? The Latino Leadership Forum is a fertile ground that is very important here in Omaha. They're going through their 9-week session now.
So you're grooming your
There's
leaders, you're giving them the
absolutely.
tools they need. They've got the natural ability.
The
but
newer
you're-
generation is starting to move in. It's our prerogative, imperative, to provide a role model for them.
That's right.
And to become aggressive, to demystify the political process, of which something I am attempting to do, of turning around and utilizing the assets that we have as citizens to the benefit of all people.
I really want to thank you for at least starting a dialogue here. This is one that could go on
Yes.
for hours and hours and hours. And maybe we'll check back in a period of time or get some other folks on here and broaden this out. I want to thank you very much, Jose Garcia, Teresa Barone McKegney, and thank you for joining us on Consider This. It's our population. Let's pay attention.
That's right.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates and First Data Resources.